This is ChangeMakers with Katie Gore, finding the right solutions for the affordable housing community.
This week's ChangeMaker is Kate Bennett, the Administrator of the Boston Housing Authority. Kate has worked in affordable housing development, policy, and planning for more than 25 years with an emphasis on revitalization. Kate currently oversees an agency that provides affordable housing for over 50,000 people. Kate, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much, Katie. Great to be here.
You became administrator and CEO a little over a year ago, but you really knew the job because you were second in command before taking the reins. So how did you first come to the Boston Housing Authority?
I came to the BHA a little over 20 years ago as a senior planner. I had gone back to school after a kind of previous life in high tech and got an urban planning degree and began to work in affordable housing in a couple different municipalities around Massachusetts, and eventually landed in '98 at the BHA, primarily focused on our redevelopment projects, our choice neighborhoods and Hope 6 initiatives, where we have an opportunity to sort of rebuild a community from the ground up, demolish very distressed public housing, rebuild new housing, and also incorporate a lot of services and other sort of neighborhood level initiatives. And so I got pretty hooked on those projects. They're some of the most transformative projects that happen in our city, and the intersection of policy issues with those projects I think is just really fascinating. And so I have stayed a long time at BHA working on that stuff. Eventually became number 2 deputy to our former administrator, Bill McGonigal. And when Bill retired, Mayor Walsh appointed me acting administrator, and I was formally confirmed as administrator in January of 2020. And so my leadership at BHA has been almost entirely under COVID times. So that has had a huge impact on our agency, our residents, our communities, our city, but certainly on me from a leadership perspective. So this past year, we've certainly been focused, laser focused on COVID and our communities and our base of employees. We're a large public agency. We have about 800 employees, mostly working throughout every neighborhood of the city, some that work centrally and now remotely.
About 6 months ago, you co-authored a piece for the Boston Bar Journal where you explained the challenges faced by low-income households, and really even in the context of what was happening with COVID. Have you seen something, either a success metric that you guys have been able to exhibit your resilience, or just really unique challenges that your community has faced that other communities may not have faced?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think we've definitely seen an incredible resilience in this time, and there have been serious challenges as well, some of which remain unsolved. We really had to turn on a dime in response to the pandemic, which is not an easy thing for a large public bureaucracy to do. And I think, one of the silver linings or lessons from COVID for me is that our agency is capable of huge flexibility and great speed when faced with an emergency like a pandemic. And it's really sort of, I think, busted us all out of a certain mindset about what it takes to make change and make improvements here at BHA. And so I'm very grateful to our employees and our residents and our city for all of the support that BHA has seen during this time, but also for the support in changing the way that we deliver services so that we could do so safely in the pandemic, and really, fundamentally change many of our business processes literally overnight. I think a couple of key successes I would point out are, first of all, an initiative that we launched just before COVID really hit the city, but under that pandemic we were really able to be successful at, which is housing over 1,000 families that were homeless in BPS school, in Boston Public School System. So 1,000 families, 1,700 children were housed during the pandemic through our voucher program and a special partnership with the schools and with some service providers to provide sort of wraparound services during that process. Alongside that, we did a number of things to incent landlords to take vouchers and kind of break into neighborhoods that were previously really inaccessible for families with vouchers. So we provided a rent incentive to landlords paying an extra month's rent, and we also changed our payment standards to make expensive neighborhoods in Boston more accessible. And so I'm really proud of our team for that, because I think that's been hugely impactful to kids at a time when, it's hard enough to learn under COVID, working remotely, as well as, being, in school maybe super part-time. But to do that without being stably housed, I think makes it completely impossible. And so we were able to provide that stable housing to a really large segment of the homeless population in Boston. The other thing I'd mention is we delivered over 250,000 meals, and food insecurity is something that certainly existed in our communities before COVID. The city very quickly put up an incredible infrastructure to feed families that were struggling due to loss of jobs or other issues, health issues, and other things that were coming up under COVID. And one of my great wishes, and I'm determined to sort of, work through this with city and other partners, is as the pandemic wanes, we don't want all that great infrastructure to fall away. I mean, we have figured out how to bring food to our families. The need was there before. The need's going to be there after everybody's vaccinated and back at work. And so I really want to take advantage of COVID to raise the baseline of providing meals and food security to our families going forward.
And what you've really described here is, not just a safety net for your residents, but you've, realized that it takes, part of the landlord, part of the rent, it's reaching families who are in that desperate moment of need, and then also, preventing some life instability. And, we've talked on our previous podcast, whether we as housers, do we just, pay attention to providing the unit and making sure the roof is there, or is there a holistic, comprehensive structure that needs to come into play? And what you've just, set out is to say, hey, there's a whole safety net structure here that comes along with housing people in a time of need. And so, accolades to you and your team for trying to make sure that that is more than just a pandemic moment.
Exactly. I mean, the foundation of what we do is housing, but we're working across many other sectors. We're working across the health sector, the mental health sector, job creation, job training sectors, youth and youth engagement, resident empowerment and organizing. All of those things are really part of what we do. And although the rhetoric always is that, housing is the sort of platform that everyone needs in order to move forward, I think there are really just so many other needs that have to be integrated into housing delivery, affordable housing delivery, those that you've mentioned. And I think COVID has certainly made visible many of the emergency needs that exist in our city. But as I was saying about food access, I mean, those needs existed before. And in some ways, there's a certain validation or relief in the attention and resources and investment that is happening now due to COVID to address needs that existed pre-COVID. I think we're seeing a time when there's just more understanding and compassion for those needs. Again, those needs are going to exist going into the future as well. And so I think a lot of the conversations we're having at the city level is, what's the new baseline for our city? How do we want to come back? What is the new normal that we're striving for? And those conversations are deeply rooted in discussions of equity. I think it's a really fascinating and wonderful time for our city in that respect, because we have an opportunity here to, kind of redefine, and everybody's sort of out of the normal way of thinking about things, and we have an opportunity to sort of rebuild. And we've been lucky at BHA. We had tremendous support from Mayor Walsh in his 7 years in office, huge investments made in public housing, great support for our communities. I have no doubt that Mayor Janey is also going to be very supportive of our communities, and her agenda certainly is an equity agenda. And so I'm very hopeful that the ways in which we've built out infrastructure and the ways in which we've become more attuned to needs of folks that are struggling economically will be able to be in a better position to serve them in the future.
I want to ask you a question about this housing, the meals program and just the solving that food instability for somebody who doesn't know where to do it, or how'd you orchestrate that? And because I think I read it was like a $2.5 million partnership that you guys were able to put together.
Yeah, we had some food programming at many of our sites pre-COVID, but we really had to sort of take it up a huge notch and kind of put it on steroids in order to really meet what became a very fast-growing demand. And so we literally hit the phones and surveyed across our developments. We had our management teams literally calling every household to sort of determine whether folks were in trouble with respect to food. And at the same time, we were fortunate to receive some federal relief funding for COVID that we could apply to food. And so we quickly gathered up partners some that were already working with us on smaller food programs, others that had not previously been involved with us, to design a program to meet the needs at every single site. We have 64 developments citywide. So it was a pretty tall order. I think we probably had some food programming at about half of those sites pre-COVID, but it was not, even in the sites that were being served, it was not at a scale that we had to meet for COVID. And so, we very quickly sort of assessed that need through the phone surveys, and we set up a variety of programming that included both prepared meals, mostly for our elders and disabled households, but also included bulk food and sort of boxes of raw food and other supplies. Sometimes non-perishable supplies were in demand more, and we tried to be as flexible as possible in getting folks what they needed. We also amassed a huge volunteer network. Everything we do, we have to do in multiple languages. And so we wanted to make sure that people both knew of the opportunity, and we were communicating in several languages about the opportunity, but also that when we were actually making deliveries or setting up food programs, that there were people on site that could talk with our residents. And so we had a very robust volunteer program to roll that out, and we've been lucky to continue to receive federal funding and a lot of city funding as well to keep that up.
You mentioned the mayor of Boston, and for those who are not familiar with what's happening in Boston, you guys have had some really major and exciting changes happening there. The mayor has traditionally been very supportive of preserving affordable housing and having it as a top priority, and just like you mentioned here, actually providing local funds. But now Mayor Walsh has been recently tapped by President Biden and confirmed for Labor Secretary. So big news for your leadership there. So what's the strategy moving forward with the new mayor? I believe you said Mayor Janey.
Yes, Mayor Kim Janey was formerly president of Boston City Council, and so she has a long-time relationship with the Boston Housing Authority. I think that she is very familiar with our communities. I think she will be a great advocate for our communities. And as I mentioned, I think she has a particular focus for the city on equity and eliminating disparity within our city. And so I think that that aligns perfectly with addressing the needs of our public housing communities. And so, Mayor Janey has been reaching out to me and to our communities. She has made an effort to visit our communities already. She has attended vaccine clinics, which we're in the throes of, doing many, many vaccine clinics all over our portfolio right now. And so I think she is, going to be a great partner, and I'm really excited about it. I'm excited for Boston, for the history that's being made this week with her appointment as the first woman and the first Black mayor of Boston.
Exciting times for you as the city and for the housing agency to be really at the forefront of what's happening, both in your city, your region, and nationally. So good moves there, and
just to say, I mean, the majority of our kids, the vast majority of our kids are kids of color, and so for our kids to see the mayor being appointed that looks like them, I just think is very powerful for our kids.
Now we have to stop right here, but coming up in the second part of my conversation with ChangeMaker Kate Bennett, the administrator of the Boston Housing Authority, Kate talks about the biggest issues she's currently facing in the biggest city in Massachusetts.
We have over 50,000 families on our waiting lists combined between public housing and leased housing. And so the need is just tremendous. As much as we are, I think, ranked first in the nation for creation of affordable housing, we need more. We need more of it.
Thanks for listening to Changemakers with Katie Gore. To find out more about Katie, go to quadel.com. That's QUADEL.com. This has been a production of Forbes Books Radio.